Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be practicing defensive principles. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, we're going to be focusing on closing an opposition player down in a 1v1 scenario. But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we're working with this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So in terms of players this week, we're going to be working with 12 outfield players, okay? Not going to be working with goalkeepers, but if you do have goalkeepers, you can add it into certain parts of the session. So where we're going to be focusing on players dribbling into space and trying to pass through gates, we can then have an end goal with a goal as well. So if you have one goalkeeper, we can add that into parts 2 and 3, okay? If you have 2, we can do the same. In terms of the equipment, okay, we're going to be focusing on using balls, okay, bibs, and then cones, and then if you have them as well, we could use poles for certain areas, okay, to mark out a certain area for when we're trying to pass through, but cones will just be sufficient for most of the session. In terms of the setup for this part of the session, okay, so from each outer cone here into the middle is going to be 15 yards, so you're going 30 yards, okay, of total width and depth for that, and then the box in the middle can just be 5 yards, okay, either side, so 5 by 5 area, so it's 35 by 35. So how we're going to split it, 2 groups of 6, okay? Or if you wanted to as well, you can just have all the players going. You can maybe have 2 balls going at once, okay? It's up to you. So the player at the start point here is going to look to drive into space, okay? And they're going to look to try and get past the defender and stop the ball in the box. What you want to try and do is have balls located around the spares, okay? So then if one player does actually manage to drive the ball into there, or a ball goes miles away on a clearance, okay, then the next player is ready, okay? So how it's going to be here, this player looks to drive in. So what we're focusing on here is covering the ground quickly, okay, retaining our body shape, so assessing the player that we're up against, okay? So if we're going against the right footer, try and show them on the left foot, okay? So close the pitch, close one half of the pitch down, close one area down, show them one way, okay? And then once they start coming in, driving towards us, can we look to engage to win the ball back? Okay, so we're getting our angles and distances, making sure that we're not straight facing the ball and letting the player go either way, making sure we're not flat-footed, so we're on that angle, we're showing them one way. If they do decide to turn, we've got that ability because of our body shape and our angles to win the ball back. Now, as soon as that ball's been won or it's been scored in here, the player who was the defender, okay, is going to move to the back of the queue, okay, to the right. So we're going to work around this way, okay, so we're going clockwise. The player who was attacking will then become the defender. So the next player will have a ball ready here. They will look to then drive into space. So this player's got to cover the ground really quickly to get themselves in, okay? And they might only have a few yards of space, okay, to try and stop the player. So we're trying to slow the attacker down. This player looks to try and score again, okay, by driving in. We're looking to engage, win that ball back, okay? The defender joins the back of this line here. This attacker will then become the defender. So the attacker in here doesn't go, okay, until this play is finished, okay, and the players have started to move, okay. Once this player starts to move, that's when they can look to cover that, they can drive into space quickly. So they want to drive quickly, this player's looking to cover that ground quickly, restrict the space, okay, and then look to win the ball as they look to turn or engage, or look to drive forward, look to engage to win the ball, and then finally, this player, okay, then becomes the last player to drive into the space. This player joins the back of that queue, okay, and then we're obviously looking to cover that ground quickly, focus on our angles and distances to win the ball back there. And again, then the next player here can go as we go back around to the start. This player joins back of there. This player covers the ground quickly to get across. So again, focusing on covering that ground quickly, our angles and distances, okay, delay, okay, the attacker, deflect away, okay, restrict the space, and then engage. Important to engage to win the ball. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now moving into a 2v2 drill. So we're going to be focusing on trying to stop the opposition, driving into space, and then trying to transition to play forward. In terms of the setup for this part of the session, okay, we're going to go with 30 yards of depth, okay, and the width is going to be 25 yards, but you can add an extra couple of yards either side here. So it's going to be, the gates are going to be in here, so we're going to have 5 yards for here, 5 yards for here, 5 yards for here, and then 5 yards in between each one. Okay, so we've got 3 gates in here, and then 2 areas in here, so they're all 5 yards, and then again, just add a couple of yards either side of the end gates for a little bit more extra space. So you might want to go to 30 yards and just have a couple of yards either side. So the blues are going to be the team defending, and then you can swap that over after a certain amount of time. Okay, so the players are working on both sides of the ball. So the blues are going to start here. They're going to play the ball up to the reds. Okay, as soon as they played it, cover that ground quickly to get across. Now we're focusing on their angles as well, so we don't want this player getting ahead of the ball. Okay, because then they're leaving that space in behind. So the person who's got the ball, okay, that defender puts more pressure on, okay, and this player covers the space. So then if the ball got played across, they've then got the ability to step up, okay, whilst also being able to protect the space in behind. Whereas if this player has the ball and this player is higher there, then again, we're seeing that once this player drives in here, we're on the back foot, okay, the space is there to be played into, okay, whereas in here, let's focus on what we can see, okay? Focus on what we can control, the ball being in front of us, okay? There's pressure on the ball here as they travel across. As this player moves across, okay? That ball gets played, we cover that ground, okay? We get our angles, where do you want to show them? Okay, so if we can cut off the inside of that pitch, we're showing them down that line, okay? And then we can engage to win it back, play through one of the gates, okay? So we're transitioning to then play forward. Now, with the reds as well, this player might have the ball, okay, and they might start driving across the pitch. As that happens, okay, where's this player's movement going to be? So this player just gradually starts to drop, okay, this player can start to put pressure on. As this player moves across, we just look to cut that space off, okay? So this player is just below the ball, okay? So then if this player tries to make a run in behind, we can drop to intercept the ball. If this player carries on moving across, we get this player, okay, our left-sided player here, cutting off that area of the pitch. So then we're saying, okay, where are you going to go? Put them into a channel, okay, back ourselves 1v1 to engage to win the ball back, and then play through the goal. Now, after it's finished, players move to the back, okay, we move ourselves up, and then the next set of players go. So the players are getting rest in between each one, again playing, cover that ground quickly, okay. So what are we trying to do? First off, okay, restrict the space, slow down the attacker, okay. Now can we manipulate them? So we've got this player higher here, this player dropped, we might get a player trying to cut inside, can we narrow it off? Where's this player going to go? Okay, so their movement's got to be quick, okay. If they're going behind, that's not a risk to us, we can see it, okay, we can control it, okay. If they drive straight up to here, we've got to be wary of it, so we might take that extra yard back, this player here, so then if the ball gets played into them or tries to into space, we can control it on that first touch to win it back, okay. So most important things is, once we played that pass, getting out quickly, okay, restricting the space, slowing the attacker down, manipulating them, and then our body shape in the 2v2, okay. Both players not defending off the same line, okay, making sure our body shape is closing off certain areas of the pitch, making sure that the player pressuring the ball, okay, is the highest defender, the opposite player is playing off a different angle, not ahead of the ball and leaving space in behind. So protect that space in behind and then engage when we can. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now focusing on working as a unit to block passes through, okay? So we're going to have our group split into 2 groups of 6. So our blue's going to be defending, red's going to be the team looking to pass through. Now in terms of the setup, okay, we're going to have 20 yards of width, and then we're going to have 2 20-yard areas, okay, so 40 yards, okay, of depth. And then these areas in here, okay, you can decide how large you want the gates to be. So They can either be 5 yards, so you'd have 5, 10, 15 with just small gaps in the middle of a few yards, or you could maybe make the middle area a little bit bigger and the wider area smaller, or the opposite way, okay? But what you want to focus on for the attacking team is maybe giving more points out for passing through centrally, which is more difficult. And for us, we shouldn't be getting beat centrally with having those players in the two units, okay? Wide areas, it might happen when the ball gets transferred quickly, okay? So that can be less points. So when the ball goes in to one side, okay, we're focusing on keeping our shape. Put pressure on the ball carrier as well, okay? So if a player opens out here, making sure they're under pressure and they haven't got time and space, okay? And then focusing on our unit coming in, okay? So when the ball's central, okay, the two opposite players, can they narrow off, okay? So preventing that pass through, but also saying, okay, we're cutting your options off. There we go, this player puts pressure on, these two players come across. Players in behind that, okay, are looking to stay narrow as well. Okay, so it's going to be difficult for the attacking team, but we're focusing on obviously trying to work on our defensive principles so it can be tight to start with, and if you wanted to, you can increase the size of the area. But with it only being a unit of 3, okay, then I'd say stick to the 20 yards, as it can be broken down a little bit more easily than a unit of 4. You'd make it bigger then, okay? So then if the ball then switches across, we're focusing on covering that ground quickly, but maintaining our shape, okay? So the players in behind here, what we don't want is these players standing right there, keeping the gap too close, just a couple of yards behind the line at all times. So these players in here are just trying to move as well at times to try and find once the ball comes across. So they might come inside here, and then once that ball transfers across, can this player come in short, okay, to try and receive that ball, okay? If they win it back, the Blues, it's just going to be ball back to the coach, start again. Now, what you could do as a progression is have maybe 2 small-sided goals, okay, and they look to score in them, okay, or some gates for them to pass through. If you had goalkeepers, okay, you could even have a goalkeeper either end or a goalkeeper one end for them to score in, and these players can use that keeper to keep possession as well. So if the ball does transfer, what we're focusing on is retain our shape, okay, quickly, making sure that we're not getting played through again, okay, so we're focusing on always talking in here as well. So these players in behind communicating, telling players to check their shoulders, okay, to maybe move right, move left, to make sure that we're not leaving a gap. So if this player's here, they're leaving that gap through, okay, let's say a player might not be able to receive it, but still focusing on that gap's too wide, can we stay central in here? When this player comes up, these players don't want to be wide, stay inside, okay, so doing both jobs, they can then close that player down, but also they're focusing on protecting that space, okay, through the pitch as well. So if you wanted to, as a progression, you could take out the gates, but just have a line going across, and these players can play through anywhere, okay? So we're just focusing on stopping passes, which means we've got to focus on our shape even more, because instead of this player having to play through there, they can play a diagonal pass through there, reverse that pass through there. That can be another progression as well. So focusing on staying compact as a unit, okay, making sure we're covering that ground quickly again to get across and put pressure on the ball, focusing on our angles and distances from each other, okay, deflecting away, okay, so putting that pressure on to deflect away from any gaps going through, and staying connected at all times as a unit. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.